Today on Histories Tech, we are looking at the Convair B-58 Hustler, the first operational bomber capable of reaching Mach 2. This 1950s aircraft was actually developed to be a high-altitude supersonic bomber capable of reaching far and vast targets around the world. But sadly, this aircraft never lived up to what it was supposed to and had a very short career. But let's go ahead and look at the development and history of the B-58. Now, the B-58 was developed as part of a program to replace the subsonic Boeing B-47 Stratojet. The idea to develop a supersonic aircraft literally came within years of the development of the B-47. According to aviation authors Bill Gunston and Peter Gilchrist, there were actually some military officials that were really in favor of a supersonic bomber and the potential it could have in future warfare. Multiple companies actually were interested in being contracted for this, but really only two companies came to the forefront of this. Boeing with their XB-59 design, which was designed to be a replacement for their program for the XB-55, which was actually the B-47's replacement. And this was just a whole chain of kind of dismissals and failures for Boeing to build their next big bomber. And the other company in the running was Convair. And Convair actually wanted to build a Delta Wing bomber because they had success with these aircraft, their Delta Wing fighter aircraft. Convair put together their initial proposal for a Delta Wing bomber aircraft, codenamed the FZP-110. The Convair design was given the go-ahead, and Boeing was actually given a contract for a different aircraft that would become the B-52. Convair began the development of their Delta Wing bomber. And it, of course, went through multiple iterations, trying to reconfigure engine placement, nacelle placement, things like that. The design was finalized. They had to begin developing entirely new things for this aircraft. To do several things to try and protect the crew. This included redesigning the cabin and crew compartments to withstand the heat and pressure of Mach 2. Even eliminate the traditional ejector seat that had become popular at the time, and replace it with an ejection capsule. With all this, they could begin flight testing the aircraft, and it actually went through an incredibly long, for the time period, flight test of over 3 years. People discovered the aircraft actually had several flaws with it. Sadly, one of these had to do with its very unique and very famous feature of it, the MB-1C pod that was underneath the aircraft. This pod was used to not only hold additional fuel for the aircraft, but also could contain a single nuclear device. Now, the problem with this was, one, the fuel continuously seemed to leak from this pod, and two, when fuel shifted around it, it actually changed the center of gravity of the aircraft and could change stability issues for it. Some of these issues were addressed by replacing the MB-1C with a new two-component pod. The aircraft was finally declared operational in August of 1960. 1 month later, it competed in the Strategic Air Command's combat competition at Bergstrom, and it actually proved itself to be superior not only to the B-47, which it was trying to replace, but Boeing's new B-52 Stratofortress. Even with this success and proving that it could outperform its competition, it was still a problematic aircraft. In order to get pilots to fly the aircraft, they actually had to train them to use the Convair F-102 Delta Dagger because it had similar flight capabilities, being another Delta Wing designed aircraft. Additionally, its 3-man crew found the aircraft incredibly busy to fly. They were constantly having to perform in order to keep the aircraft operating at peak capability. Additionally, it was a very expensive aircraft to operate, which is why production was only kept at 116 aircraft. Because of all of these issues, SAC only deployed them with 2 units, the 43rd Bombardment Wing out of Carswell Air Force Base and later Little Rock Air Force Base, and the 305th Bombardment Wing out of Bunker Hill Air Force Base, later renamed Grissom Air Force Base in Indiana. Now, even with it actually being deployed with units, and all of the early problems being resolved, and the Strategic Air Command actually being interested in liking the bomber, Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara decided that the B-58 was just not needed anymore. Now, the end of the B-58 came for multiple reasons. One, the Soviet Union had developed surface-to-air missiles that could reach it, and the way to counter them was to fly at low altitudes, which minimized the need for a high-altitude supersonic bomber. Secondly, the B-52 could be operated cheaper and had a higher payload. And then thirdly, they had an airplane in development to replace it, which is going to be the F-111. With all of that, in 1970, the aircraft program was shut down and the B-58 was retired. And while the aircraft was never used in combat, it did have an important role in the development of other aircraft. In fact, it tested the radar systems that were going to be on the Lockheed YF-12 Interceptor and the never-built North American F-108 Rapier. Now, in terms of variants, there were about 8 variants for this aircraft. However, most of them were never even built. The B-58 B, C, D, and E models were all designed but never built, and they each had different functions, such as the C model being a replacement for the XB-70 and the E model being able to launch ballistic missiles. Only 2 real variants were built, the TB-58A, like this one seen here, 668 is the name of the aircraft, and the RB-58A were the only real variants ever built. However, there was one unusual variant, and that was actually this aircraft here, the Convair Model 58-9. This rather unusual aircraft was actually built upon the design of the B-58 and was designed to create a supersonic transport. This aircraft was being built as part of a competition to build an American supersonic transport to compete with both the Concorde and the Tupolev Tu-144. And like all American supersonic transports, the plans were eventually canceled. Now, sadly, unlike some other aircraft I talked about, once the end date hit for the United States, that was pretty much it. But the legacy of the 58 doesn't end there, thankfully. Several of the pilots actually ended up going on to pilot the YF-12 and later SR-71s. And if you want to go visit a B-58, you can. There are still 8 survivors around the United States, including my personal favorite, 668, which used to be located in Galveston, Texas, at the Lone Star Flight Museum's old location. However, after Hurricane Ike, the aircraft was moved and is now currently at Little Rock Air Force Base in Jacksonville, Arkansas. But there you have it, a quick look at the B-58, an aircraft that really could have been the future of high-speed bombers, but because of its own complexity, the fact that it had a low bomb capacity and was easily surpassed by next generation, even its own competition, it was rather quickly retired, but its legacy can't be ignored. The fact that it still holds several records to this day shows what kind of an aircraft this really was. But that's it for today. Thank you for joining me. I look forward to talking to you on the next time.